The morning began like any other in Hollywood. The cameras waited outside studios. The lights were ready and reporters whispered about the upcoming film awards. But by afternoon, something strange started to happen. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, two of the most loved stars in the industry, were nowhere to be found. Their assistants tried to call them, but the phones went straight to voicemail. The studio had no idea where they were. Even their closest friends had received no messages. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. The news spread fast. Entertainment channels began showing old interviews of them, wondering if they were planning a surprise project. Fans filled social media with questions and theories. Some said they went on a secret trip together. Others believed they were avoiding the pressure of the industry, but no one could prove anything. By the second day, the rumors turned into concern. A producer shared that Keanu was supposed to attend a charity event that morning, something he had never missed before. Sandra, too, was expected at a film set where she was helping young actors rehearse. Both were known for being punctual, kind, and deeply respectful. For them to vanish without a word felt completely out of character. Paparazzi began searching for clues. One photo emerged online showing a car that looked like Keanu's parked near a small gas station 200 miles outside Los Angeles. The store owner said he had seen a man who looked like him buying coffee, but he wasn't sure. There was also a woman wearing a cap who seemed familiar, but she kept her face hidden. When asked if they spoke, the man simply smiled and said, "Just keep doing good things, sir." Then they left quietly. That one sentence made people even more curious. What did he mean by keep doing good things? A few journalists decided to travel to the area. It was a small mountain town surrounded by tall pine trees and a river that curved gently through the valley. It was peaceful, far away from flashing cameras and city noise. The people there lived simple lives, working in small shops, cafes, and farms. A local waitress at a diner named Lily said she had served 2 guests who matched their description. They arrived in the evening, dressed plainly, carrying only 2 small bags. They did not want attention. They ordered soup, bread, and tea. They sat in the corner quietly, talking softly and smiling. When Lily asked if they were tourists, the woman replied, "We are just here to rest our minds." The man smiled and thanked her for the meal. Before leaving, they tipped generously, but asked her not to tell anyone about them. She thought they might be writers or artists looking for peace. She never imagined they were 2 of the world's most famous actors. The next morning, Lily went to deliver breakfast to their rented cabin, but the place was empty. Only a small note was pinned to the door. It said, "Some kindness must remain unfilmed." She didn't understand it at first, but the words stayed in her heart. Back in the city, news outlets grew restless. They ran headlines like "Keanu and Sandra missing for 5 days" and "Hollywood mystery deepens." Fans from around the world posted messages asking them to come back, yet both remained silent. Meanwhile, deep in the quiet valley, Keanu and Sandra were far away from any road signs or signals. They had taken a small dirt path that led to an old cabin near the river. It was a simple place, built decades ago by a retired teacher who used it for fishing trips. Inside, there was no luxury, only wooden furniture, a small fireplace, and a notebook kept on a table with a line written in pencil. "Find peace where the world forgets you." As Sandra read it aloud, Keanu smiled. He said softly, "Maybe that's exactly what we need." For years, both had lived under constant pressure. Cameras flashing in their faces, interviews dissecting their words, fans expecting perfection. But beneath all that fame, they both carried quiet exhaustion. Sandra looked at the calm river outside and said, "Sometimes I think people forget we are humans too." Keanu nodded. "We give the world stories, but maybe the world never asks for our silence." They sat together on the wooden porch, watching the sun set. No noise, no questions, no cameras, just the sound of wind moving through trees. The peace felt strange at first, almost unreal, but soon it began to heal them. That night, they lit a small fire. Sandra brewed tea while Keanu strummed a few chords on an old guitar left behind by the previous owner. For the first time in months, they laughed without thinking of an audience. As the firelight flickered, Sandra asked, "Do you think people will understand why we left?" Keanu looked into the flames. Maybe not now. But someday they might see that sometimes kindness needs silence. His answer carried a quiet mystery that even Sandra didn't fully grasp. She could tell there was something deeper in his heart, something he hadn't yet revealed before going to sleep. They both made a small promise, not to check their phones, not to call anyone, not to read the news. For 1 week, they would simply live without the world watching. But fate had other plans, because what they were about to do in that hidden valley would not only change the lives of strangers, it would soon shock the entire world. And it all began with a sound they heard the next morning, a faint cry, coming from the woods beyond the river. They both froze for a moment. Sandra whispered, "Did you hear that?" Keanu nodded slowly. Yes, it sounded like someone calling for help. Without hesitation, they grabbed a flashlight and started walking toward the sound. The cold wind brushed against their faces as they followed the faint voice deeper into the forest. Neither of them knew that this simple step into the trees would lead them into one of the most unforgettable moments of their lives and uncover a truth that would make millions believe in humanity again. And that was how their disappearance truly began. The morning air was cold and heavy with mist. Keanu and Sandra walked carefully through the trees, following the sound that echoed faintly from somewhere near the river. Every few steps, they paused and listened. The cry grew weaker, but still carried enough pain to make their hearts race. After several minutes, they reached a small clearing. Beside a fallen tree lay a young boy, maybe 12 years old. His clothes were torn, and one of his legs was caught between thick branches. His face was pale, but his eyes were open. When he saw them, he whispered, "Please help." Without hesitation, Keanu knelt beside him. "It's okay, we're here," he said calmly. Sandra quickly checked for any other injuries while Keanu tried to lift the branch. It was heavy, soaked from rain, and covered in mud. Together, they managed to move it just enough for the boy to pull his leg free. The boy winced but tried to smile. "Thank you," he said softly. Sandra looked at him with concern. "How long have you been here?" he whispered. "Since yesterday. I came looking for my dog. I fell and couldn't move." Keanu gently helped him stand, but the boy cried out in pain. It was clear his leg was injured. Without another word, Keanu picked him up in his arms, and they began walking back toward the cabin. As they walked, Sandra tried to comfort him. "What's your name?" she asked. "Liam," he said. "My mom works in the village. She must be so worried." Sandra smiled softly. "We'll take you to her. You're safe now." When they reached the cabin, Keanu laid the boy on the couch. Sandra brought warm water and a clean cloth, carefully washing the cuts on his face. The boy looked around curiously. "Are you two actors?" he asked shyly. Keanu smiled but didn't answer. "We're just travelers," he said. "We came here for peace." Liam nodded, too tired to question further. After they wrapped his leg with a soft cloth, Keanu said, "We'll take you to the village doctor once you rest." While the boy slept, Sandra looked at Keanu with quiet wonder. "You didn't even think twice," she said. "You just lifted him and walked." Keanu looked out the window. "When someone needs help, you don't think. You just move." A few hours later, the boy woke up. Sandra prepared tea and bread for him. He told them more about his life. His father had passed away 2 years ago. His mother worked long hours at a small store in town. Liam often explored the woods because it was the only place he felt free, he said softly. "We don't have much, but Mom says kindness is what makes us rich." The words stayed in Keanu's mind. He exchanged a glance with Sandra, who was clearly touched. They decided to take Liam back to his village. Sandra drove carefully along the narrow dirt road while Keanu sat beside Liam, keeping him calm. The boy pointed to a small house at the edge of the village. When they reached there, a woman came running out, tears streaming down her face. She hugged her son tightly. "Liam, where were you?" "I searched everywhere." Then she turned to them. Thank you so much," Sandra smiled. "He's safe now. He's very brave." The woman looked at them with gratitude. "I don't know how to repay you." Keanu simply said, "You already did. You raised a kind child." They were about to leave when the woman hesitated. "Please wait," she said. She went inside and returned with a small old wooden box. She opened it to reveal 2 handmade bracelets woven from colored threads. My husband made these before he died. They are simple, but they carry luck. Please take them. Keanu looked at Sandra. Both were touched by the gesture. He accepted the bracelets and thanked her with a humble bow. As they walked back to their car, Sandra said quietly, "Do you realize what just happened? We came here to escape the world, and the world found us anyway." Keanu nodded. "Maybe this is what we were meant to find." The following days passed peacefully, but something inside them began to change. Every morning they would walk to the village, helping locals with small tasks. Keanu repaired broken chairs, carried wood for elders, and fixed the old church bell. Sandra helped children at the small school, teaching them to paint and read stories. They never told anyone who they were. To the villagers, they were simply two quiet travelers who smiled a lot and worked with their hands. At night, when they returned to the cabin, Sandra often sat by the fire, lost in thought. "You know," she said one evening, "I think this place is healing me more than any rest ever could." Keanu looked at her and smiled. "Maybe helping others is the best way to heal ourselves." But their peace was interrupted one morning when the village doctor arrived at their cabin. His face was troubled. He said the small clinic in the village was about to shut down. The equipment was old, the roof leaked, and there were not enough funds to buy medicine for the children. Sandra looked at Keanu, and he already knew what she was thinking. He asked the doctor quietly, "How much do you need to fix the clinic?" The doctor sighed. "More than this town can ever afford." Keanu stood up. "Don't lose hope yet," he said softly. The doctor looked puzzled. "Why would two strangers care so much?" Keanu smiled. "Because we were once saved by strangers too." That night, Keanu and Sandra talked for hours by the fire. They both knew this was no longer just a vacation. Something deeper had brought them here. Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was life's way of reminding them that true peace is not found by escaping the world, but by becoming part of it again. Sandra finally said, "What if we do something that no one ever knows about?" Keanu nodded. "Exactly. Kindness that stays silent lasts the longest." And so, they made a plan. One that would soon change not just the small village, but the world's view of them forever. The next morning, they disappeared again. No one knew where they went. The cabin door was left open, and only one thing remained on the table: 2 handmade bracelets and a folded note that said, "This world still has good people." The villagers were confused, but the real reason for their disappearance was something far beyond what anyone could imagine. The sun rose slowly above the valley, painting the mountains gold. For the first time in days, the village felt calm again. But no one could stop wondering where the 2 quiet strangers had gone. The boy Liam often sat by the river, holding the small bracelet Sandra had left behind, whispering to himself, "They'll come back. I know they will." What no one knew was that Keanu and Sandra were not far away. They had moved deeper into the valley, staying in another small cabin near a group of farmers. They wanted no attention, no news, no camera, only a purpose. On the 3rd night after leaving the village, they met an old farmer named Gabriel. He was kind, but looked tired. When Sandra offered him tea, he shared his story. "The harvest failed this year," Gabriel said quietly. "The storms destroyed half the crops. Most families here don't have enough to eat. The children go hungry. The clinic can't buy medicine, and people have started leaving." Keanu listened in silence, eyes heavy with thought. Sandra's hands tightened around her cup. She whispered, "How long has it been like this?" Gabriel sighed. "Too long. We ask for help, but no one hears us. The world forgets places like this." After he left, there was a long silence in the room. The fire crackled softly. Sandra turned to Keanu and said, "We can't walk away." Keanu nodded slowly. "We won't." They stayed awake the entire night talking. By morning, they had decided on something neither of them had ever done before. They would use their resources, quietly, without credit, without names, to rebuild the village. But not through fame, not through a charity headline. It would be an act of silent giving, something that would touch lives but leave no trace of ego. The next day, they drove to the nearest town and met a local shopkeeper named Joseph. Keanu told him they wanted to buy supplies for farming and building, but they didn't want anyone to know who was behind it. Joseph was confused. "People usually come here to take pictures, not to help," he said. Keanu smiled. "We prefer pictures to stay in hearts." Within a week, materials began arriving at the village. Wood, tools, bags of grain, even medical kits. The villagers were shocked but grateful. When they asked who sent it all, the driver simply said, "A friend who believes you deserve a chance." The doctor who had spoken with them earlier found a new generator at his clinic. A note was tied to it. "For nights when you must not give up." The teacher at the school received new books and supplies with another note. "For young minds that dream even when they have nothing." Soon, life in the small village began to change. Fields started growing again, the clinic reopened, and laughter returned to the children's voices. No one knew who to thank, but Liam suspected something. He went to the old cabin where he had first met them. It was empty again, but he noticed fresh footprints leading toward the river. He followed the tracks until he saw them. Keanu and Sandra, sitting on a wooden bridge, feet hanging over the water, talking quietly. He ran to them, tears in his eyes. "You came back," he said. Sandra smiled and hugged him gently. "We promised, didn't we?" Liam looked around. "Everyone in the village is happy again. But they don't know it's you." Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "They don't need to know. Sometimes love works best when it has no name." The boy looked puzzled. "Why would you help without letting them thank you?" Keanu thought for a moment. "Because real kindness doesn't need an audience. It just needs a reason." Sandra added softly, "And you gave us one." That night, they all sat together by the fire. Liam shared stories of his school and how the villagers were planning to rebuild the old community hall. Keanu listened carefully, asking about everyone by name. Sandra wrote down a list in her notebook. Not of things to buy, but of dreams to fulfill. As the flames flickered, Sandra said quietly, "It's strange, isn't it? We left the noise of fame and found something louder, the silence of hearts being healed." Keanu nodded. "And that's the sound the world needs to hear." But what they didn't know was that their quiet deeds had already begun to spread beyond the valley. Joseph, the shopkeeper, had told his cousin about the mysterious strangers who bought supplies for the poor. The cousin had shared it online, calling them the Angels of the Valley. A blurry photo of Keanu and Sandra, taken from far away by a child, began circulating. Within hours, fans and journalists were comparing the silhouettes, realizing the truth. The world went wild. Hashtags trended across social media. News outlets called it the kindness escape. Reporters rushed to the region hoping to confirm the story. Back in the valley, Keanu and Sandra had no idea what was happening. They were busy helping the villagers rebuild the roof of the small school. The sound of hammers echoed in the air, mixed with laughter. But as evening fell, Joseph arrived in a hurry. "People from the city are coming," he said nervously. "They say they're looking for 2 stars. Keanu looked at Sandra quietly. For a moment, they both said nothing. Then she whispered, "It was only a matter of time." Keanu took a deep breath. "Let them come. But the story they find should not be about us. It should be about what people can do when they choose to care." He walked toward the river, the sky turning orange behind him. Sandra followed, holding the bracelet the boy's mother had given them. She said softly, "Maybe this is how the world learns again, by remembering that even silence can shine." As the wind moved through the valley, Keanu smiled faintly. "Then let it shine." And that was how their secret act of kindness began to ripple across the world, one whisper at a time. But the greatest reveal was still to come. something so unexpected it would change how people saw them forever. The next morning, the quiet valley woke up to an unusual sight. Several cars rolled into the village carrying reporters, cameramen, and curious locals from nearby towns. They spoke loudly, pointing at the rebuilt clinic and the new farming tools. Microphones appeared where there had once been silence. Villagers watched nervously as strangers began asking questions. "Who paid for all this?" one reporter asked. "Who brought the supplies?" But no one had a clear answer. Some said an angel. Some said travelers. One elderly woman simply said, "It doesn't matter who. What matters is that they cared." By afternoon, someone showed the reporters a blurry photograph. It had been taken by a child from behind the schoolyard fence. In the picture, two people stood together holding wooden planks. One man, one woman. The faces were not fully visible, but the outline was unmistakable. The reporters gasped. "That's Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock." The story exploded across every news outlet within hours. Back in the hidden part of the valley, Keanu and Sandra sat quietly inside their cabin. Joseph had told them that their secret was out. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Only the sound of rain filled the room. Finally, Sandra said, "We didn't do this for attention." Keanu nodded slowly. "And yet, the world found us anyway." He looked out through the small window where droplets ran down the glass like soft tears. Maybe this is what life wanted. Not for us to hide, but for others to see that kindness can still exist, even in silence. The door suddenly knocked. It was Gabriel, the old farmer. He looked emotional. "People are coming here to film," he said softly. "They want to see you. They want to thank you." Keanu shook his head. "This village doesn't need cameras. It needs peace." Gabriel's eyes filled with gratitude. "You gave us that peace, my friend. Let the world know what you gave." For a moment, Keanu said nothing. Then he smiled faintly. "Then let them know the truth. That the real heroes are the people who stayed." That evening, as the reporters set up near the village square, they saw movement at the far end of the road. Keanu and Sandra were walking side by side, dressed simply, no makeup, no designer clothes. The villagers followed behind them, not as fans, but as friends. The reporters rushed forward, asking questions all at once. "Why did you disappear? Is this your new charity? Why this village?" Keanu raised his hand gently, signaling for silence. "We came here because we were tired of noise," he said calmly. "We wanted to remember what peace feels like, and we found it. In these people," Sandra added softly. "The world often forgets that kindness doesn't need to be performed. It just needs to be done." For a moment, no one spoke. The quiet was heavy, beautiful, and honest. Then one of the villagers, a young girl from the school, stepped forward. She handed Sandra a small drawing, two figures standing under a bright sun with the words, "Thank you for not forgetting us." Sandra knelt and hugged the girl. "You gave us more than we gave you," she whispered. The next day, news channels around the world broadcasted clips from that moment. Headlines read, "Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock's secret act of kindness inspires millions." Journalists described it as a modern-day story of humility. But what caught everyone's heart was not their fame, it was their silence. They had not filmed their help, not turned it into promotion. They had lived among the people, worked beside them, and disappeared quietly again. A reporter asked Keanu, "Why didn't you make a foundation with your names?" He smiled and replied, "Because the moment kindness needs a logo, it starts to fade." When they left the village a few days later, the villagers gathered at the road to see them off. Liam ran to them and hugged them both tightly. "Please don't go," he said softly. Sandra wiped a tear from his cheek. "We're not really leaving. You'll see us every time someone helps another person without asking for anything in return?" Keanu placed his hand on Liam's shoulder. "Keep that promise alive. Help someone when you can, and never wait for cameras." The car drove away slowly, disappearing into the misty road. The villagers stood still, waving until the last shadow faded behind the trees. But what no one knew was that the story was far from over. A few weeks later, the doctor at the clinic received an unexpected letter. It contained a bank statement showing a massive donation under an anonymous foundation name, the Week of Unseen Good. Inside the envelope was a small handwritten note. For every child who must never lose hope. Use this and pass it forward. The doctor, shocked and emotional, shared the news with the village. They realized the quiet travelers had built something far bigger than anyone had imagined. But the real twist came when a journalist traced the foundation name. It led to several hidden donations made years earlier to orphanages, hospitals, and schools around the world. All anonymous, all connected to the same secret initiative. And then the world understood. This was not their first time disappearing. It had been happening for years. Keanu and Sandra had been vanishing from the spotlight again and again, not for rest, not for escape, but to quietly rebuild lives across forgotten corners of the world. The kindness they shared had not begun in this valley. It had simply been discovered here, and now the whole world was watching, not with gossip or questions, but with awe, because for the first time in a long time, Hollywood's brightest stars had reminded humanity of something pure. That real greatness is not about who you are seen as, but what you choose to do when no one is watching. Weeks passed, and the story continued to move hearts around the world. Interviews, documentaries, and talk shows kept praising their secret mission. Yet Keanu and Sandra stayed away from all of it. They turned down interviews, refused red carpet questions, and gave no statements. Instead, they returned to their quiet lives. They walked through city streets like ordinary people, smiling politely but avoiding attention. Sometimes, Sandra would whisper, "It feels strange seeing people talk about something that was meant to stay quiet." Keanu would reply softly, "That's how kindness travels, even when we don't plan it." One evening, they sat together in a small cafe far from Hollywood. The walls were old, the air smelled of coffee and rain. Keanu took out a folded notebook from his jacket, the same one they had kept in the cabin. He opened it to a page filled with small notes and names. Each one was a place they had quietly helped in the past. Sandra smiled. "So it really wasn't the first time?" Keanu nodded. "And it won't be the last." He pointed to the next blank page and said, "Every year, 1 week of unseen good. No cameras, no posts, just quiet acts." She looked at him, eyes filled with warmth. "That might be the most beautiful promise we've ever made." They both signed their names at the bottom of the page and closed the notebook gently. Outside, the rain began to fall harder, but neither moved. Sandra whispered, "Do you think the world will remember us for this?" Keanu smiled. "Maybe not. But if even one person decides to help without needing to be seen, then we've already done enough." And as the rain continued to fall, their reflection in the cafe window faded into the soft light. Two souls who had found peace not in fame, but in the quiet power of giving. Months passed quietly. Hollywood returned to its usual rhythm of movies, lights, and interviews. Yet something had changed. Every few weeks, stories appeared from different parts of the world. A school rebuilt in Africa, a hospital in South America, a home restored after a storm in Asia. Each act carried the same message written in the same handwriting. Some kindness must remain unfilmed. People started connecting the signs. The handwriting matched the note once found on the cabin door. Soon, fans realized it was Keanu and Sandra again. But this time, the mystery deepened. No one could find where they were now. They had disappeared once more. News outlets called it the second silence. Reporters searched every lead, but all they found were stories of help, never fame. A fisherman from Greece said a quiet couple had paid to rebuild his boat. A nurse from India shared that strangers had donated enough medicine for her entire ward. Every story ended the same way, with gratitude and no names. The movement became unstoppable. Millions across the world began dedicating a week every year to doing good in secret. Schools called it the Week of Unseen Good. Workplaces joined too. Even strangers on the street started helping quietly. It was no longer just a mystery. It had become a movement. One evening, a letter arrived at the same mountain village where it had all begun. It was addressed to the villagers from two travelers who found peace here. The villagers gathered to open it. Inside was a photo. Keanu and Sandra standing at the edge of the river, smiling softly. Beneath it, the message read, "We are not lost. We are everywhere kindness still exists." That single line traveled across the internet like light. The world fell silent for a moment, realizing the truth. They had not just disappeared. They had become part of something far greater than fame or story. Weeks later, during a charity event in Los Angeles, the lights dimmed unexpectedly. The host walked on stage and played a short video that had arrived anonymously. It showed clips from villages, schools, and hospitals, places touched by their kindness. Then, at the end, Keanu's calm voice spoke. "The world doesn't need more heroes. It just needs more hearts that stay gentle even when no one watches." Then Sandra's voice followed softly. "We didn't vanish. We only learned to live quietly, where help was needed most." When the video ended, the audience stood in silence. Not applause, not noise, just tears and quiet respect. Outside the hall, hundreds of fans lit candles. They called it the Night of Quiet Lights. It became a tradition. Every year, on the same date, people around the world light candles in silence to honor acts of unseen goodness. Months later, Liam, now older, visited the same cabin in the valley. It stood exactly as it was before, except for one new thing. A small wooden plaque on the door that read, "Leave your fame outside, bring only your heart." He smiled, placed a flower on the doorstep and whispered, "Thank you for reminding us what real stars look like." As he walked back toward the village, the evening sun cast a warm glow across the trees. The river shimmered quietly, as if keeping their secret alive. And somewhere, far from cameras and noise, two people walked through another quiet town, helping a small family fix their roof before winter. Still humble, still smiling, still unseen, they had not just disappeared. They had become the proof that silent kindness can move the entire world.